We often talk about trauma in terms of what happened, the loud arguments, the physical marks, the moments of visible crisis. But there is another kind of trauma that is far more silent, and in many ways much harder to identify because it is defined not by what happened, but by what didn't. This is childhood emotional neglect, or CEN. It's the absence of emotional attunement. It's the empty space where a parent's curiosity, validation, and comfort should have been. Because it's an invisible wound, the children who grow up in these environments often don't realize anything is wrong. They simply adapt. They develop survival strategies that look to the outside world like personality traits or even good habits. You might be praised for being the strong one, the independent one, or the easygoing one. But underneath that veneer of confidence lies a collection of behaviors designed to bridge a gap that was never meant to exist. Take, for example, the habit of extreme hyper-independence. On the surface, being someone who can handle everything on their own is seen as a badge of honor in our society. You're the person who refuses help, who figures out the complicated software at work without asking the IT department, and who manages a personal crisis without ever picking up the phone to call a friend. But if we peel back the layers using a psychological lens, we often find a child who learned very early on that their environment was unresponsive. When a child reaches out for help or comfort and consistently meets a wall of indifference, distraction, or irritation, the brain performs a radical calculation. Asking for help is a risk that leads to rejection. Therefore, I must be my own source of everything. This isn't just self-sufficiency, it's a trauma response. It's a defense mechanism rooted in the belief that people are fundamentally unreliable. When you refuse help as an adult, you aren't just being productive. You are protecting yourself from the crushing disappointment of having a need that goes unmet. This leads directly into another seemingly normal habit: the inability to identify what you're feeling, often referred to in psychology as a degree of alexithymia. You might find yourself in a situation where someone asks, "How do you feel about that?" And your mind goes completely blank. It's not that you're being secretive, it's that you genuinely do not know. In a healthy childhood, parents act as emotional mirrors. When a toddler's crying, the parent says, "You're feeling frustrated because that toy broke." This labels the internal sensation and validates its existence. But in a neglectful home, that mirroring never happens. The child's emotions are treated as invisible, or worse, as an inconvenience. To survive, you learn to mute your inner world. You disconnected the wires between your body's sensations and your conscious mind, because feeling those emotions was useless. There was no one there to help you process them. As an adult, this manifests as a flat emotional life, where you feel like you're observing the world through a pane of glass, wondering why everyone else seems so much more connected to their passions and pains than you are. Another habit that often goes unnoticed is the compulsion to over-explain or justify your actions even when no one has questioned you. Music. Have you ever found yourself giving a 3-minute backstory for why you were 5 minutes late, or justifying why you bought a specific brand of bread? This usually stems from growing up in an environment where your needs and boundaries weren't inherently respected. You learned that to have a preference or to make a mistake required a case to be built. You had to prove that your actions were logical and irreproachable to avoid being dismissed or criticized. You're essentially preemptively defending yourself against a neglectful or judgmental ghost from your past. You don't feel like you have the right to simply be or to make choices without an accompanying dissertation on why those choices are valid. Then there is the apology reflex. This is the habit of saying, "I'm sorry," for things that aren't your fault, or even for simply taking music up space. You apologize when someone bumps into you in the grocery store. You apologize for asking a question in a meeting. You apologize for your house being messy when there's a single book out of place. This habitual apologizing is a sign, music, of a deeply internalized sense of being a burden. If you grew up feeling like your presence was an imposition on your parents, perhaps they were perpetually exhausted, depressed, or simply uninterested. You learned to shrink. You learned that the safest way to exist is to be as small and as low maintenance as possible. The apology is a way of saying, I'm sorry for needing space. I'm sorry for existing in your field of vision. It is the verbal manifestation of a child who was taught that their needs were a secondary concern to the comfort of the adults around them. This brings us, music, to a particularly subtle behavior, the social chameleon effect. You might notice that you are incredibly good at reading a room. You can sense a shift in someone's mood before they even realize it themselves. You adapt your personality, your tone, and your opinions to match whoever you are with. On the surface, this looks like high emotional intelligence or people skills. But for those who experience emotional neglect, this is often a hypervigilant survival tactic. Because your parents didn't provide a stable emotional baseline, you had to become an expert at monitoring their moods to ensure your own safety or to find the right moment to ask for music something. You became a mirror because you weren't allowed to have a solid self. Now, as an adult, you might feel like a different person depending on who you're talking to, leaving you with a haunting question. Who am I when no one is watching? This lack of a core identity is a direct result of not having your unique traits and emotions reflected back to you during your formative years. Furthermore, there is the habit of the second guess. This is an internal dialogue that questions every decision, no matter how small. Should I buy this shirt? Did I sound stupid in that email? Do my friends actually like me, or are they just being polite? When a child's reality is consistently ignored or denied by their caregivers, a process sometimes called gaslighting by omission, the child loses trust in their own perception of the world. If you said, I'm sad, and your parent responded with, no, you're not, you're just tired, or simply ignored the statement, you learned that your internal compass was broken. You stopped trusting your own feelings and started looking for external cues to tell you what was real. This creates a lifelong pattern of seeking reassurance and a chronic inability to feel confident in your own judgment, because the person who was supposed to help you build that confidence was essentially absent. We also see this manifest in a very specific relationship dynamic, the caregiver role. You might find that you are the person everyone turns to with their problems. You are the therapist friend, the one who stays late to help a colleague, the one who fixes everyone else's life while yours remains stagnant. While this seems noble, it is often a way to avoid the vulnerability of being the one with needs. In your childhood, you may have discovered that the only way to get a positive response from your parents was to be useful. Maybe you took care of your younger siblings, or maybe you were the emotional support for a parent who couldn't handle their own life. You learned that your value is tied to what you can do for others rather than who you are. This creates a lopsided life where you're surrounded by people who take, but you have no idea how to receive, because receiving feels dangerous. It feels like a debt you can't possibly repay, or a trap designed to make you vulnerable. When you grow up in an environment where your needs, music, were secondary to a parent's instability, receiving care feels like an anomaly. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You think, what do they want from me? Or, I don't deserve this. This is why many adults who experienced emotional neglect find themselves in one-way friendships. You are the therapist, the fixer, the reliable one, the shoulder to cry on. But the moment you have a crisis, you disappear. You don't music call anyone. You retreat into your shell because deep down, your subconscious believes that if you aren't being useful, you are a burden. This is the service-based worth trap. It's a habit of justifying your existence through labor because you were never taught that music, you are inherently valuable just for being alive. This leads us into another normal habit that is actually a profound survival mechanism, extreme, almost pathological hyper-independence. Snorts? You might pride yourself on never needing anyone. You handle your own taxes, your own car repairs, your own emotional breakdowns, and your own physical illnesses without ever picking up the phone. On the surface, society applauds this. We call it resilience or strength. But in the context of developmental psychology, this is often a counterdependency response. If you were neglected, you learned early on that the people who were supposed to protect you were either absent, unreliable, or overwhelmed. You learned that asking for help resulted in either a no, a sigh of frustration, or total silence. To protect yourself from the crushing pain of being let down, you simply deleted the ask for help button from your internal operating system. Your hyper-independence isn't a personality trait, it's a fortress. It's a way of saying, if I don't need you, you can't hurt me by leaving or failing me. But look at the cost of that fortress. It's lonely inside. When you refuse to be seen in your weakness, you also prevent yourself from being seen in your totality. True intimacy requires music, the risk of reliance. If you can't rely on someone, you can't truly connect with them. Then, there is the habit of chronic indecisiveness. Do you find it agonizingly difficult to choose what to eat for dinner, what movie to watch, or even what color shirt to buy? This isn't just about being easygoing. For a child of neglect, having a preference was often a liability. If you expressed a need or a want, it was ignored or mocked. So you learned to suppress your internal compass. You became a chameleon. You started looking at others to see what they wanted, and then you mirrored that. Over decades, this severs your connection to your own gut feeling. When someone asks, "What do you want to do?" your mind goes blank. It's not that you don't have a preference, it's that you've buried your preferences so deep to stay safe that you can no longer find them. You are constantly scanning the room for the correct answer, the one that will keep music the peace or make everyone else happy. Because you grew up believing that your own desires were irrelevant. Perhaps the most heartbreaking music habit is the apology reflex. You apologize for taking up space. You apologize when someone bumps into you. You apologize for asking a clarifying question at work. This is the hallmark of someone who